I have never been genetically blessed with anything that gives me an advantage with running. I've not got what most of the world would probably refer to as a stereotypical runner's physique. Most people that look at me don't even think I'm a coach, never mind that I strength train and run. But I have regularly ran all of my life, and it's never come naturally to me. I've always found it really, really hard. From like PE at school to sports day to playing tennis as a kid and having to do like loads of drills, right up to going on my first ever intentional outdoor run as a student and trying to build up to 5K because I saw someone at my part-time job had done it. As I got older, I started to notice that I actually found running way harder than a lot of people did. And I started to notice a pattern from when I was a kid and doing lots of tennis drills, which was everyone seems to be able to run faster than me and they just find it easy and I don't. And when Strava first came on the scene ages ago, and I was tracking my runs on there and I was looking at other people's, I could always see that they could always run further and faster. And it seemed like they were just doing it with so much ease. And I think that made me realize that for some people, running will come a bit more naturally. Just like for some people, drawing or music will come more naturally. And for some people, like maths or cooking might come more naturally. Running did not come naturally to me. Obviously, if you're genetically gifted at anything, you can't get better at it without actually putting the work in. But having a little bit of a genetic advantage, especially when it comes to running, would absolutely be nice. And I think the main thing that I've noticed as a coach that supports people with running further and lifting heavier is that I get a lot of people saying to me, oh, I would love to be a runner. I just don't have the body for it. I don't have the knees, the hips, the ankles. But really, when we actually pick that apart, what we're hearing is, you don't have the current strength and ability for your body to support yourself running. But that doesn't mean that you can't build a body that does run eventually. We shouldn't shoot ourselves down because we don't feel like something comes naturally and that we're not good at it straight away. There's always going to be a lot of moving parts. So if it's something that we feel like we want to explore, we feel curious about what our body can do, building up the strength, the endurance, the leg endurance, the cardio endurance to be a runner is completely possible. And there's always going to be those people that find running effortless, that never seem to get injured, and they can recover really quickly and they'll be back out running the next day. But that is not everyone, and it is absolutely not me. The reason so many of us find running hard is it's because the act of pounding our body into the pavement time and time again, 1 foot at a time, we are putting all that impact, all that exertion through one side of our body every step we take. And if we don't have the leg strength and the muscle endurance to support that, on top of the cardio engine, then we are going to find it hard. So we have to build that all up gradually and carefully. And yes, it takes a really long time, which is why I think a lot of us tend to gravitate towards it, because we like that slow build. We like seeing that real-time progress because we can see it every week. But it's also, I think, the same reason why some people just don't like the idea of running at all, because the progress does have to be slow. It's small, tiny steps every week. It's small gains mentality all the way. It's a big episode today, everyone. It is the big debrief of my journey from injury all the way to running a full marathon that I completed 2 weeks ago in Manchester, continuously and pain-free, and I recovered really well from it. And yes, I'm smug about it, and also I am a little bit shocked. So this podcast is going to be in 2 parts because it's long, and I have so many big feelings and thoughts and so many things that I want to take you through. So many things that I've learned, so many things that I think will help you with your running and give you an insight into what injury recovery and what marathon training blocks can look like based on your body and not based on what social media says marathon training should be like. So in part 1 today, I'm going to talk about what my injuries were. I'm going to talk about what my whole block of training looked like in terms of strength and running, frequency of workouts, length of workouts, and how they built up and changed based on my recovery, based on my injuries, and based on building up the volume to a full marathon. And I'm going to talk about how injuries have set me back in that journey 4 different times and how I dealt with that. Part 2, I'm going to talk about navigating things like my work, my personal life alongside the training. I'm going to talk about all the mistakes I made. I'm going to talk about the things that I did well. I'm going to talk about all the important things I did for my recovery from those long runs as the volume built up. And I'm going to talk about my taper period before the race and then race day. All from the perspective of a very chaotic, ADHD, autistic, trans, leisurely athlete whose body doesn't find running easy and never has. So I hope this gives you all a really good insight into what training for a marathon looks like. So if you're considering entering a half marathon or a marathon next year, I can give you a very unfiltered insight into what it all looks like, and not just the really glamorous side of things that we often see on social media, especially around this time of the year when it's marathon season and people are doing their victory lap, but they're not necessarily talking about all the hard work that got them there because they're just celebrating and being in their moment. And that doesn't really lend well to short form content, so a podcast is perfect for that. So buckle up, you might be in the gym, you might just be starting your long run, you might be on a nice walk, whatever it is you're doing right now when you're listening to me bang on about all of this. I appreciate you, thank you for being here. Let's do the thing. Welcome to Small Gains, the inclusive strength and running podcast where we celebrate progress over perfection and chase intentional incremental gains in our strength and running. Here we believe that small consistent steps lead to big transformations in our training, our lifestyle, and our overall well-being. If you're new here, welcome to the most wholesome corner of the fitness industry. If you've always felt a little bit like an outcast to mainstream fitness norms, welcome. That is why this exists. You're going to fit in amazing here, I promise. I had actually decided to make the decision that I wanted to run a full marathon distance in July 2023. And I was on holiday at the time. I was feeling really good about my training and I was feeling really good about work. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm actually in a place where I can probably put aside the time and commit to doing this. And one of the reasons for that was curiosity to see if I could do it. And the other reason was because if I was going to train someone to do it, I wanted to have put myself through the process as well. So I got back from that holiday, felt gassed. I went and got my gait checked at a running shop, and then I bought some new trainers. I built up too quickly, got too excited, and ended up with an Achilles injury that took absolutely months and months to get rid of. It sucked. I didn't manage to rehab that injury until October, November that year. It took a good few months. And at that point, I had started working with my coach, Tom, and I had entered a High Rocks in the interim. So I was doing all the strength training and conditioning for that, but just not the running part yet. When I was once again running pain-free, I was so excited and was feeling really good. My coach Tom and his business partner Matty were running track sessions every Sunday, and that was really good for me because it was a flat surface for me to ease back into running on and practice on. And one day we got to that track and it was shut because they had a private event on. So we went to a different track, which was less of like a stadium track and more of like a dirt track in a park. However, I think someone had taken horses on that track and we did a 5K test that day. So I was really excited. I was feeling really good. I was running my fastest ever 5K time. And then all of a sudden my ankle snapped and I broke it. And I think what had happened is I fell into like a horseshoe hole on a track. So if you ride horses, please don't take them on a running track because you will make someone very sad. If any of you followed me back then, you might remember this. It was December 2023. And I got put in a boot for 2 months. And it was while I was recovering from that I actually entered Manchester Marathon because I just felt so determined to come back from it. That was my second injury. And part of me was angry and part of me was upset. And I still just had that curiosity. I was like, why can't my body do this? Am I just really unlucky or am I just not built to do this? And I think all the hard work that I put into that Achilles rehab really knocked me when it resulted in another injury that was completely unrelated. It just felt really unfair so soon after. And I obviously was meant to do a solo High Rocks at the end of January. And, you know, I'd worked really hard on the prep for that and I'd really enjoyed it and I was really excited and I had some clients doing it as well. And I didn't deal with that injury very well at all. It really did just feel like it was the end of the world. So I did stew in it for a little bit, but then I pulled myself out and I cracked on. I was in the gym the next day because life is short. There's no point wallowing in sadness from an injury. That's not a good flavor. And there's always something you can do. I was doing the assault bike. I was doing the skier. I was able to still pretty much strength train as normal, obviously just not legs. You know, I found a way around it. I took it on the chin, but initially I didn't deal well with it. So I entered Manchester Marathon at the start of 2024, and then I entered Leeds 10K and Manchester Half Marathon as B races. So they would give me markers to work towards and they would keep me motivated, keep morale high, give me something to look forward to, and just give me a little bit more race experience. So at that point, I had 3 months to build up from 0 to a 10K. I then had 4 months to build up from that 10K to a half marathon. And then I had 6 months from that point to build up to full marathon. So the timeline looked great on paper. Obviously, none of that went to plan. After I got my boot off and was rehabbing my broken ankle, the 3 months from then to the Leeds 10K went really, really smoothly. I was feeling positive. I was pain-free. I ran the race continuously and pain-free, and I got a PB, so I was super happy with that. However, in July, my calf got crushed by a barbell pinging off a rack when I was tidying up in the gym and I couldn't walk. And I was laid there after it happened. I was by myself in the gym. There was no one there. And I couldn't get up. And I just didn't know what to do. And I think it was the shock of literally not being able to get up. When I broke my ankle, I got up and walked home. I drove myself to accident and emergency. And I had a feeling that it was broken, but not super bad. But I did manage to get up. And not being able to get up in that moment absolutely terrified me. Anyway, eventually I did hop to my car, and it took me about an hour to hop about 100 meters. And then I was on crutches for over a month, and then the rehab process started again. I took this injury far better than the ankle break. I think it was because it was just ridiculous. I'd had Achilles injury, I had a broken ankle, and now I've got a calf crush injury, all just completely unrelated. The ankle break was a freak accident. The calf crush injury was a freak accident. The Achilles was 100% my own doing. And I think at this point, I just had to laugh at how unlucky I was. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, the half marathon isn't till October and it's July now. So although the timeline is now changing, it's not the end of the world. I can still build. So I got a physio appointment and started the rehab process again. So I rehabbed the calf crush injury and I started running again for the 3rd time from scratch in August, and then I started to build to that half marathon distance. I got a month into that, and I had reached my 16K long runs. I was running distances that I'd never really tried to run before, and they were feeling really good, and I was recovering well. And then one day I woke up and I could not walk without limping. Yes, we are back here again very soon. And long story short, I had a really big health scare caused by a very angry lump in my groin that was stopping me from walking or running or putting any pressure on my right leg. So I had a lot of emergency doctor's appointments, I had some ultrasounds, and luckily within about a month I had answers that it wasn't anything scary. It was just a really, really angry lymph node that eventually did calm down, but I was limping around, I couldn't put pressure on it, I couldn't run on it. So the week before the half, I actually didn't know what was wrong with me because I hadn't had the ultrasound yet. And I had talked to my coach and we had said, you know what, I'll rest up and I'll give it a go. And then a couple of days before, I just knew it wasn't going to happen. I was going on dog walks with Aubrey and I was trying to do little hops and I couldn't even do one without being in severe pain. At the time, I didn't know what it was. Lots of different things were being thrown around by the doctors and it scared me. And I felt like if I couldn't do one hop on the spot, I would be absolutely kidding myself to think I would run a half marathon. So I forfeited my place in the half. It was too late to defer it. And I was absolutely gutted, but I knew it was for the best. And over that weekend, I did feel really sad and down in the dumps. I did want to do it, but I knew that it wasn't the big picture. The marathon was the big picture. So then we started running again in November. That angry lymph node took a good 5 weeks to calm itself down and stop causing my right leg and hip to hurt. And so from my first pain-free run after all of that, that's the point where the actual marathon training block started. So let's get into that next. 4 injuries down, and at that point I had 20 weeks to build from scratch to a marathon, which wasn't ideal, but Tom had mapped it out. And he'd basically made it so I could build up to 34 or 36 kilometers as my final long run and then taper the volume a week before the race. So that was the plan, subject to my recovery, how my body was feeling, and my feedback each week. And this is why feedback culture in workout programming and coaching is so, so important. This is why I don't just give someone a plan for 6 weeks and say crack on. We talk about training every week in Fuzz Culture Club with one-to-one coaching because our lives change, our energy levels change, our mental and physical capacity changes, and we have to adapt for that. Now, what we also can't ignore is the fact that I had already built up very comfortably to 16K long runs. So it's not like that work has to be discarded. I accumulated the volume. I just needed to start again and go through it again. But it doesn't mean that any of that work I had done the entire year prior since recovering from the ankle break doesn't count. It all counts, and it all contributed to me being able to do this eventually. So it wasn't wasted. The thing that I liked about the 20-week training block and the timeline of that was that I knew when it was going to end. It had a definitive endpoint, which was the race. I knew that all I had to do was get my head down for 20 weeks, and I just had to stick to my plan, enjoy the process, and at the end of it, I'm going to run a marathon. Ideally, if we had had that 6 months from the half marathon to the full marathon to training, what's that in terms of weeks? It's 24 weeks. If I hadn't have had to forfeit my place in the race due to the health scare, I would have accumulated a good amount of volume for that half marathon, which meant that I would have had 24 weeks to take me from a half marathon to a full. And there would have been a lot that me and Tom could have done in that time from a training perspective that could have contributed to maybe focusing a little bit more on speed or accumulating more miles, getting more time on my feet just to get me better conditioned for the race. But we didn't have that. I was starting from scratch, and it was 20 weeks to build to the full thing. So in an ideal world, it might have been longer, but it's me and my body is unlucky. And a lot of my clients have asked me during the marathon build and since the marathon, how long do I need to train for a marathon as a complete beginner, as a first timer, someone that's not run a half or a marathon before? And the answer is really boring. And the answer, as always, is a really unsexy one. It's very much, what is your starting fitness level and how long is a piece of string? It is possible for someone to train for a marathon in 20 weeks if they are a beginner. But I think ideally 24 to 28 weeks would probably be better because you can have a slower build and you can plan in intentional deloads and decreases in volume where you can rest. And I didn't have the luxury of having anything like that intentionally. And the other thing we want to consider is that although I was taking 20 weeks to build from zero to my full marathon, I've been training for years. My cardio and my strength level has taken years to build. So I had all that experience behind me that backed me up doing a shorter block. And then if you look at like a pro elite athlete, someone really experienced might build up over 12 to 14 weeks because they do this kind of thing all the time. There is really no hard rules for how long it should take someone to build up to a marathon. But the considerations for a lot of people are the time commitment, the dates, and what's going on in their life, and obviously their current level of fitness, strength, and cardio. One of my one-to-one lot is training for a full marathon at the end of this year. And because they entered it recently, I've been able to map it all out for them. And we have a nice slow build to it. We have a half marathon and a couple of B races on the way. So that's going to be a really nice, slow, sustainable build. But it also means there's a little bit of leeway as well, should any niggles or injuries arise. Now, I'm going into this 20-week marathon prep block. Let's talk about the actual format and the frequency of my workout programming. It's so simple. Like, if you saw how simple it was, I think you would probably laugh, which is why I love talking about it. To begin with, all I did was 2 short runs and 1 long run. All just continuous, steady state, conversation pace, nothing fancy, nothing intense, no intervals, no strides, no hill sprints, 2 short runs, 1 long run, all at easy conversation pace. Why? Why was there no intensity? Because of my history of injury and because this was my first marathon, I just needed to accumulate and recover from longer time on my feet. I just needed to run easy and know that I could recover from it and be pain-free. I was then doing 2 strength sessions, focusing around lifting really heavy in low rep ranges. And then I was doing 1 high-intensity, high-rock style conditioning workout because I had a high rocks doubles coming up in February. And that obviously ticked my high-intensity box for working my aerobic energy system as well. So that was 2 birds, 1 stone. And instead of smashing out 6 sessions in a row and then having 1 rest day, sometimes I would pair the shorter runs on the end of a strength session or do a double day, run in the morning, strength in the evening, or strength in the morning, run in the evening. So that would then give me an extra rest day. And I think when you hear double day, it sounds really intimidating, but really all that looked like was just doing my normal strength workout and then running 3 to 5K in an evening which for me was anywhere between 20 to 35 minutes of work. So it wasn't taking a lot of extra time, but it was giving me an extra rest day, which also kind of allowed me to have a little bit more freedom outside of work and with my social life as well. Now, after a month of this format, 6 sessions, 3 runs, 3 gym, I had some stuff going on in my personal life and I wasn't able to be at home anymore. So we had to then adapt my training frequency to suit what my new normal was going to be for the next couple of months. So Tom adapted that and I changed to doing 3 runs and 2 strength sessions. If I could get the other one in, I would, but most of the time I couldn't. So I was doing a little bit less volume and I was giving myself a little bit more flexibility and grace for my consistency with my sessions because I had so much other stuff going on and I wasn't in my own environment. And that worked well for me having to spend a lot of time away from home. And I guess this was the first instance of life getting in the way, because it always does. You can't ignore it. It always will. You'll never have a perfect training block where something doesn't interrupt it. And that was okay. The flexibility really helped. And I still got all my training in, just one less session here or there, and that wasn't an issue. When we got into the new year, we were at about week 6 of the block at this point, and then I had to take an unplanned week off completely from running because I had quite bad shin splints in my left leg. I had done some really gnarly runs in Ireland in like the wind and the rain, and it had just sort of beat me up a little bit and I wasn't recovering very well. So I just stuck to strength and took a complete week off the gym. I did some gentle cycling and then I tested a run to see how it was in week 7. It felt all right, but then actually following that, I had another 2 weeks of dealing with it because I just kept getting the pain. And so we were really cautious and really sensible because of my history of injury. A lot of people might get a little niggle and they'll be like, oh, that'll be all right. I'll be able to run on that. But for me, because of my lower limb injuries, it just wasn't worth it. So we erred on the side of caution. I remember getting out my door one day, setting my watch going and starting running, and then feeling that shin splint come on with the second step I took, and instantly texting Tom saying, I bailed, I'm going on my bike because this hurts immediately and I don't want it to get worse. So that's like the first 8 to 10 weeks of the program. It was all over the place, but that was fine. It was what needed to happen and it was what happened. I controlled everything that I could. I listened to my body and I rested when I needed it. And I also was flexible and gave myself grace when I had to deal with things in my personal life that were heavy. So my mental capacity and my actual time availability outside of work and life was heavily reduced. So now we're at week 10 and the next 8 weeks are where all the hard work starts to come into play and the runs start to ramp up and get considerably longer. So from week 10 to week 18, I only ran once a week. And some people might think that's bonkers, but what me and Tom had learned from the past year of data and injury was that my legs need a lot of time to recover from a long run. And as every week I was running further and further distances that I'd never covered before, the recovery I needed was more. So at that point, I had to accept that I am only running once a week. It doesn't matter how stimulated I am and how much I enjoy it and how good my cardio engine feels, I need that recovery time. And that was a big learning curve, realizing that I need a week to recover from these runs and I shouldn't be doing anything else. And this is why it's good to have a coach that you can talk to every week, because then you adapt and tweak. And I think at one point, me and Tom even spoke about if my recovery was still struggling, I might only run once every 10 days instead of a week to prolong that recovery time. But we didn't actually need to do that in the end because having 5-6 days of recovery, depending on my schedule, was just about enough. It started to get hairy towards the end, but that's marathon training for you. So from week 10 onwards, we're down to just 1 run a week. And then from week 10 to week 20, we also dropped a strength session and just went down to 2 a week, upper body and a lower body. So I had done my high rocks doubles by then. And whilst it was nice to have that piece of conditioning work in my schedule every week, I was on tour with my band. I was going for rehearsals, so I was away a lot. And training could really only happen 3 times a week at that point. And we got to about mid-March and I'd just come back from tour. I was pretty much progressing my squat and my deadlift in terms of weights or reps every single week until that March point. And at that point, it was just about maintenance and being sensible about how much I was actually pushing my legs in the gym, because that was also going to affect my recovery from the big runs. And in this period of time, that upper and lower session and the run, the upper session was bringing me so much joy. It was just a straight up upper bro sesh, bodybuilding style. It gave me a really good upper body pump every week, and that felt really gender affirming and fun. It made me feel good when everything below the waist felt really, really tired and depleted. And every leg day felt like a slog because I knew that that was affecting my recovery for the long run. But I also know that I needed to do it because I needed to maintain my strength and try and keep building it to support my running. So a big head fuck in a sense, I guess. Now, let's talk about the worst 2 weeks of the training block, which were week 16 to 18. I had built up to 29 kilometers for my long run, and I was feeling really smug about it, really good about it, buzzing. And then I went out and tried to do 32K and just like completely bonked. I had nothing in me. I had to bail at 24K and get an Uber home. So it wasn't even like I equaled what I did the week before and then just couldn't progress it. I fully just bonked. And I remember just sitting on the side of like a bin, waiting for an Uber, just feeling like so sorry for myself because I was getting so close to that 20-mile run and obviously so close to the race. And I just felt awful. And I had a lot of conversations with Tom about how this is just really hard. This is just a really hard thing to do. And no matter how many times you do it, it's still just going to be hard because you're trying to progress it every time anyway. A marathon distance is just really hard. And there would have been a day where I had never thought I could run 24K. So the fact that I stopped at 24 when I wanted 32 and felt a bit sad about it, it was still a win. Like I still had to take the win and frame it as that. The week after that, we adjusted my fueling completely. I ate a lot more food and a lot more carbs. It got to the weekend and then I tried that 32K run again. And I did it, but it just felt so awful. I have never ever had a run feel so hard in my life, and that's including the marathon in that. The last 8K, I felt like I was just shuffling. At one point, I did have to pause and just have a bit of a shakeout because my hips and my ankles were getting so tight. And it was at that point when I was getting in my car and driving home from that run that I thought, I don't want to do another long run. I think I'm good. I think I'm done. I don't think I've got anything in me to be able to do another one and then race 2 weeks after. And initially what Tom had planned for me is that the week after that 32K, which is 20 miles, I would then do it again, but with a range of 32 to 35 before we tapered. For anyone that doesn't know what tapering is, it's essentially just rolling back the volume so your legs get more rest once you've hit your furthest run of your training block. So then when it comes to race day, you're feeling nicely recovered and fresh. But at the point where I was at, my body just felt fucked, for lack of a better term. There's no other way to describe it. And not only that, but my central nervous system just felt fried from the overexertion. So I almost set a boundary for myself. No more long runs. I'm done. This is where I want to leave it. And I told Tom that, and obviously he was absolutely fine with it. Most people's longest run of a marathon training block is about 32K. So I did feel okay about it. But the issue that we had at that point is because I was only running once a week, I hadn't actually accumulated the weekly volume that was anywhere near close to marathon distance, 42K, which 3 weeks out from a marathon is absolutely not ideal in any sense of the word. If I was running 2, 3, 4 times a week, I would have been hitting 42K as a minimum weekly volume months prior, but I literally just couldn't do more than my legs could do because they needed the recovery time, and we had to adhere to that. We had to respect it because otherwise I was just going to deplete my legs so much that it could result in an injury, and that is not what we wanted. So at this point, our final training shift from the original plan was to accumulate 40 kilometers of running over 10 days before we tapered for the race. As you might have guessed at this point in the podcast, that actually didn't happen either. I ran the first of the 4 10Ks at the start of the week. I had 5 days to recover from that nasty 32K. And then I did a 10K on a Friday afternoon and I just felt awful. I was actually running it slower than I was running 25K a month prior. And that was obviously a sign that I was so fatigued and depleted. I just still felt like I had nothing left to give, even though it was 10K and not 30. I rested over the weekend and I tried the second 10K on the Monday and it felt better, but still not good. So at that point, I talked to Tom and we agreed we'll do one more 10K at the weekend, then we're going to leave it there. That will be the last run. So we hadn't managed to accumulate a marathon's worth of running. So I was then going into my marathon knowing that the most volume I had accumulated in a week was 32 kilometers, but I needed to be running 42. Again, this wasn't ideal and it was frustrating in so many different ways because my cardio engine and my brain just feel like they can go forever, but my legs just physically can't because of their history. And my body is just a body that finds power and impact hard. It doesn't deal with it well. And that's the one thing that I've probably learned more than anything over the last few years, multiple times over. But I think me and Tom knew that if I got to the start line without any re-injury or any little niggles, then I would most likely be able to complete the whole thing because my mindset is strong. And when it comes to long endurance work, just getting my head down and grafting is usually pretty solid. So if I make it to that start line on the day, injury-free, pain-free, I will finish that race in some capacity. So my final run ended up being 1 week before the marathon. Then I tapered for a week and I didn't run at all. Most people will probably taper for a couple of weeks and just steadily reduce the volume. We kind of inadvertently did that just because I needed the recovery time and was so tired. But I actually had 6 days, so like a full week of absolutely no running at all before race day. And I can't tell you how much I needed that mentally and physically. Central nervous system was just so fried, body just had nothing to give, which you've heard me probably say a few times by now. The only thing I did on race week was an upper body workout and a cycle. I was meant to do a lower, but I didn't get it in at the start of the week because I was taking care of my mum. She'd been in hospital. And then at that point, it was too late in the week to risk having a leg day before you have to run a marathon. So that was the prep. I'm obviously going to talk more about race day in the next part. But what I want to convey from going through this training block and my thoughts and my feelings and how we adapted it is I wanted to show that this is not a stereotypical prep for training for a marathon. And the reason I think this is so important to talk about is because stereotypical doesn't always work for every person and for every type of body. A stereotypical marathon prep on paper didn't work for me. My legs needed more recovery time as the runs got longer, and that's what they got. Now, a question you might have asked yourself at some point in this episode or thought to yourself is, will me mostly just doing one long run a week at the back end of the training block have affected my performance and the time that I got on the day? And yeah, 100% it will have done. I didn't run as much as I wanted to. I didn't accumulate the volume that I wanted to. I didn't recover as well as I wanted to. And I might have got a faster time if I had managed to accumulate more volume and spent more time on my feet. But my body just wasn't able to this time, and that's okay. And I didn't actually mind that at all because this was just the first one. And I knew in my gut that this definitely wouldn't be the only marathon that I was going to do. I would definitely do another. And this was just the baseline. This was the first one. And once I'd got this one in the bag, I was going to use all the data, all the knowledge, all the lessons learned to fuel the next one. And there's something really exciting about that because then I get to do better. I get to try again. The important thing to note from this whole process is that my timeline and my training just sounds so weird and up and down, but I was training within my body's own capabilities, not anybody else's. I wasn't comparing my marathon training to someone else in my coaching group's marathon training because different abilities, different history of injury, different bodies. That's why we can't continue to compare ourselves to what other people are doing. We kind of have to just like run our own race. And that sounds like a really cheesy pun. I didn't actually intend for it to be related to running, but you do kind of just have to stay in your lane and do you, especially when you're not necessarily doing this competitively. You're doing it more for yourself to see if you can. And if we're constantly looking to other runners or influencers or professional athletes to compare our training frequency, how many strength and runs we're doing, or what pace we're doing everything at, we can never know what is going on in another person's body or in another person's life or in another person's brain. And all of those things affect everything. And the two most important things for me to get out of this marathon: did I run 26 miles continuously and pain-free? Yes. Did I finish the entire distance? Yes. So very much mission accomplished from the chaotic as hell training block. I did 28 runs over those 20 weeks, which doesn't sound like a lot, considering some folk will probably do 60 to 80 runs in the same amount of time for a prep. And over the course of the year, from that first run after my marathon break, I only did 66 runs. So 0 to marathon, running 66 times. It definitely wasn't ideal, but it was a really fun up and down journey. And I really enjoyed actually documenting the process as honestly as I could, because I know there's a lot of people that sugarcoat a lot of things about running a marathon, and it is just really, really hard. So that was how the training panned out, and that was my experience of a first-time marathon runner doing a 20-week training block. I hope it's helpful. I hope it gives you a good insight into how things can chop and change and be flexible based on the person and how they're recovering and what's going on in their world. In part 2, we're going to get into navigating work, personal life, and the training load that comes with prepping for a long distance event like this. I'm going to talk about the mistakes I made, the things that I did well, the most important things I did for my recovery. We're going to talk about my taper, and we're going to talk about race day, the victory lap. I already cannot wait to do another one. I've got a couple of ideas of which marathons I might want to go for, so we'll see how that pans out for next year. For anyone who's been listening to this and is thinking, I really want to try that. I am really curious for what my body can do. Maybe it's a 5K, a 10K, a half, a full marathon, an ultra marathon, or maybe it's just actually getting started. Maybe it's just taking the first steps into doing a little bit of running and building it up and seeing where it goes and if you like it. Maybe it's taking your first steps into the gym to either support your running, or maybe you've got that gym experience but you don't necessarily know how to structure your training so you can fit running in as well. My group program Fast and Ferocious has just started a new block of training. We're 5 days into the first block by the time you're hearing this, so if you did want to start a little bit late, I could probably just about squeeze you in. So feel free to reach out to me on Instagram or via the link in the show notes. I have pathways in the group program for beginner runners and intermediate runners. All you need is a little bit of gym experience and some familiarity with those standard compound lifts, squat, bench, deadlift, and overhead press. Alright, part 2 next week. I'm excited to get into more the mental side of things and the lifestyle side of things when it came to marathon training. Keep chasing the small gains. That is me out. Take it easy.